You know, we usually think of authors as having one clear voice, one style. But today, we're diving into a Victorian writer who had two completely different, almost contradictory voices, all packed into one amazing career.
So think about this for a second. On one hand, you've got the grimy, smoke-filled factories and the brutal poverty of 19th century England. And on the other, you have these picture-perfect little towns where the biggest drama is who's coming for tea. I mean, they honestly feel like they're from two totally different planets.
Well, it turns out they're not. Both of these worlds were brought to life by one incredible author. Her name was Elizabeth Gaskell, and because she was a minister's wife living right in the middle of industrial Manchester, she had this unique view into both the fancy drawing rooms of the rich and the really tough lives of the poor.
And that's the whole thing about Elizabeth Gaskell's work, this incredible duality. On one side, she was a fierce social crusader. She wasn't afraid to write about the toughest subjects, like poverty, class warfare, and the way society treated women. But then, there's this completely other side to her, a gentle, witty observer who wrote these hilarious and heartwarming stories about life in a small town.
Okay, so to really get a handle on her, let's start with her as the novelist of social justice. This is where she really burst onto the scene and, honestly, where she ruffled the most feathers. Now, Gaskell was a huge part of this literary movement called social realism, and the goal was pretty straightforward. It wasn't about escapism. It was about holding a mirror up to society and making the comfortable, well-off readers see what life was really like for the working poor, and to feel some real empathy for them.
And wow, did she come out swinging. Her very first novel, Mary Barton, was like a literary bombshell. It's set in Manchester, the absolute heart of the Industrial Revolution, and it does not pull any punches when it comes to showing the grim, harsh reality of factory life.
Yeah, Mary Barton was way more than just a story. It was a powerful accusation. It exposed this massive, uncrossable divide between the rich mill owners and their starving workers. It basically forced people to think about the human suffering that went into making all the cheap goods they were buying.
So, if Mary Barton was a shock, her next big social novel, Ruth, was a full-blown scandal. See, in Victorian England, an unmarried mother, a so-called fallen woman, was a complete outcast. She was seen as ruined. And what does Gaskell do? She makes one the hero of her next book. Her whole point was to take a direct shot at the moral hypocrisy of the time. The novel makes this passionate case for compassion and forgiveness, showing its main character not as a sinner, but as a victim who deserves a second chance. For 1853, that was an unbelievably brave thing to do.
But the book that really ties all of these social concerns together, and the one she's probably most famous for today, is North and South. It's this epic story about conflict, culture clash, and of course, romance.
At the very heart of the novel is this amazing contrast. You've got Margaret Hale, who comes from the quiet, traditional, agricultural south of England. She gets uprooted and moves to the gritty, fast-paced, industrial north. And there, she immediately clashes with John Thornton, this tough, no-nonsense factory owner. They basically are these two different worlds colliding in human form.
And their story is the backdrop for all the biggest conflicts of the time. You know, new industry versus old traditions, the bitter strikes between workers and bosses, and a main character, Margaret, who is way more independent and outspoken than women were supposed to be. It's a huge social epic, all wrapped up in a really compelling and complicated love story.
Okay, but just when everybody thought they had her figured out as this serious, grim social writer, Gaskell completely changed gears and showed everyone this other side of her genius, as this incredibly sharp, funny observer of small-town life.
And get this, the same year she published that super controversial novel Ruth, she also published Cranford, and you couldn't find two more different books. Cranford is warm, it's funny, it's just completely charming, and it's still one of our most popular books today.
The world of Cranford is just such a delight. It's this little town run almost entirely by women, and the biggest crises are things like a cat swallowing a piece of expensive lace. It's written as a series of light, funny stories, but Gaskell is too smart for it to be just fluff. If you look closely, underneath all that charm, she's still exploring really interesting ideas about class, money, and what life was like for these women.
So, you've got the fierce social reformer on one hand and the witty village observer on the other. How do you even square that? Well, her legacy is so powerful because she refused to be just one thing.
Her range was just astounding.
I mean, besides what we've talked about, she wrote a dark, tragic, historical novel called Sylvia's Lovers. She wrote the definitive, super-personal biography of her good friend Charlotte Bronte. And her last novel, which she never got to finish, Wives and Daughters, is widely seen as this absolute masterpiece of character and social observation.
And here's the key to it all. It didn't matter if she was writing about a violent factory strike or a silly tea party. Gaskell had this incredible gift for weaving in really sharp social commentary into stories that were just, first and foremost, incredibly human and impossible to put down. So in the end, she wasn't the social crusader or the gentle observer. She was both. She just got it. She understood that life is made of huge injustices and tiny funny moments. It's both tragic and warm. And her real genius was that she could see and write about all of it.
Which kind of leaves us with one last question to think about. In our world today, which version of Gaskell do we need more? The one who wasn't afraid to call out inequality, or the one who celebrated the small, everyday connections that hold us all together? You know, maybe the answer is that, just like back then, we desperately need both.